Hi. So this week we're looking at week 5, which looks at the growth and decline of urban environments. So we're looking at cities that existed but no longer exist for various reasons, but we're also looking at cities that have been built but no one lives in, such as those in China. So it's quite an interesting unit, looking through a whole range of historical and future plans. So good luck. Hi. So this week we're looking at week 5, and I find this week particularly interesting because we're looking at how cities have disappeared more than how they've grown. And we look at some of the historical reasons why cities have declined. But we also look at some of the modern cities, particularly in China, where these huge cities are being built, but no one's actually going to live in them. And one of the things that geographers do is look at what the population is doing in areas and planning for the future for that population. And sometimes that planning doesn't work. So we need to look at all the factors that go into why these cities have been built, why some cities have declined, and what's going to happen in the future. Okay, so I'm just going to read through the information that's on the website. So why do urban areas decline? Over the ages and even in recent times, there have been many cities, towns and villages that have declined or been abandoned. There are many reasons for this. Environmental factors. Over time, all forms of urban environments will deteriorate with age and will require renovation or renewal. Extreme atmospheric events such as cyclones, hurricanes and tornadoes, which exhibit strong winds and flooding rains, can have devastating short-term impacts on urban environments. And sometimes in a lot of these towns that are old and perhaps not maintained, once you have one of these cyclones, hurricanes or tornadoes go through, the decisions are made not to rebuild it or to rebuild it somewhere else. Or, as in the case of Darwin, to rebuild it, but rebuild it differently. Long-term events such as desertification and climate change can also have negative impacts. Movements of the earth, such as due to earthquakes, volcanoes and tsunamis, can also destroy urban environments. Two of the most famous events are the destruction of the mythical city of Atlantis by earthquake and subsidence, which is sinking, and the burying of the region of Pompeii and Herculaneum by volcanic ash in AD 79. So we have some images here of Pompeii, where the whole city, it was a thriving urban city, and when the volcano erupted, the whole city was covered in a layer of ash, which made it unlivable, and you've probably seen the images of the bodies that are sort of frozen in time. And you can see that it's been left as it was. They haven't tried to rebuild it, they haven't cleared it out, it was simply left. Human factors. So human factors, which include changes in the social, economic and political elements of a region, can be the cause of decline of cities and their urban environment. The destructive elements of war on the social fabric and economy of a nation, which have significant impacts on urban environments, is one example. Angkor Wat, the capital city of the Khmer Empire in Cambodia, and thought to be the largest city in the world at the time, was abandoned in the 15th century due to a combination of wars and a series of droughts. When you look at the video, you'll see the impact that a drought would have on Angkor. If you're not familiar with the city, it really was built on water. The destruction of its economy, which was based on management of water and rice production, meant the city was no longer viable. Another example of the human factors, and one that you'll talk about a little bit later on, are places like Whyalla, and even the Elizabeth North region, where you have these industries in these places. The steelworks in Whyalla and the Holden factory in Elizabeth. And if they close down, then it has a huge impact on the people living and the economy of that area. As an example, I've got a house in Elizabeth that I bought and rent out to my brother. And the usual pattern with housing is when you buy them at a certain price. And over the years, they increase in value with inflation. Now, as soon as it was announced that the Holden plant was closing down, the house prices dropped or stayed the same, because a lot of the people who live and work in that area are reliant on that Holden factory. And if they close down, they're without work. There's no incentive to move to that area. So the economy is slowing. It's suggested that a similar thing might happen in Whyalla, unless another economy gets another factory or another industry is up and running. Will Whyalla be able to survive economically without the steelworks? Okay, so the video underneath is a guy explaining Angkor, and you'll just notice that Angkor is spelt differently. I've come across a couple of different spellings. There's also Siem, I can't pronounce it. There's another Cambodian name for it as well. So just be aware, if you are planning on doing any research, that there are a couple of different spellings of it. Usually Google will correct it for you and get you to the right place. So this guy is a geoscientist. So he focuses on the geography and the geology of areas and understanding how that impacts where people live, and in particular where they lived in Angkor, how they set up this city, and why water in particular was so important to them. In modern times, there are many examples of towns and cities with extensive urban environments that have declined. Some reasons for change include depletion of mineral supplies and mining operations, changes in demand for industrial production and manufactured goods, and a downturn of the global economy. Paradoxically, the city of Ordos in China has been built ahead of its time and remains unoccupied due to insufficient population. So I'm not sure if this video is the same one that's on the hard drive, because it was taken down from YouTube. The quality of this video on my website isn't fantastic, but it's still fine. 60 Minutes did a report about some of these ghost cities in China. And they really are sort of fully formed, functioning cities. And the interviewer talks to one of the architects or the city planners, and he talks about how he was able to get this fantastic job where he could just create a city out of nothing and do whatever he wanted to, because there was so much money in China that he was able to just sort of go crazy with the planning of this city. So that video is about 10-12 minutes long. Now, some other examples, I'll just expand this page so we can zoom in a little bit more on them. We have Wittenoon in Australia. I'm not familiar with this place, but it was abandoned in 2006 after asbestos mining was banned due to health issues. We have this place in France, which was deserted in 1944, but kept as a memorial after its population was massacred during World War II. So similar to the Pompeii city or environment, this was also kept as a memorial. Pripyat near Chernobyl. Now you've probably heard of Chernobyl, so this was a city near there in the Ukraine. It was abandoned in 1986 after the nuclear accident and radiation contamination. And of course, you've all heard of the Wild West and the ghost towns. So Bodie is an example in the United States. After the gold mining boom concluded in 1915, then the city was abandoned. And Kowloon, a shanty town in Hong Kong, was abandoned and then demolished by government order in 1993 to clean up the city, reduce squalor and crime. So this was taken before they demolished it. So this is quite an interesting case in that the city was intentionally sort of bulldozed, and the people removed from this area by the government. So it's quite an interesting idea that the government can come in and kick people out and demolish the city. Now the next video is from a James Bond film. Now I watched this film a couple of years ago and was fascinated by this idea of this deserted island, but assumed it was either a set or photoshopped or doctored, and the story was in the movie was that this rich guy had bought the island and kicked everyone out. So when I started looking into it, it transpired that it actually was a real island, and for the most part looks like this, but the cause of why it was abandoned was different from James Bond. So the deserted island of Bond's adversary Silver in the movie Skyfall might seem the result of the writer's fantasy, but does actually exist. The island is called Hashima and is located off the coast of Japan. In 1959, the island was one of the most densely populated areas on Earth. On the tiny island, only 400 by 160 metres, more than 500 people lived and worked. The artificial island was developed during the first half of the 20th century for the exploitation of underground coal mines. Mitsubishi, the owner of the mine, thought it would be more efficient if the employees lived closer to the mines. This is how the island was built as a city, including hospitals, schools, shops, cinemas, and even a cemetery. The island was active until 1974, when the coal mines became obsolete due to gas. When the mines were closed, the people left instantly, leaving behind their homes and even some of their belongings. Okay, so questions are underneath. So let's just walk our way through those. Obviously, you've got the notes from G and H videos. What environmental hazards can lead to the destruction or damage to urban environments? So we've got that heading, the environmental factors here. So it's just a matter of having a look through some of those, putting it into your own words. We've got the extreme atmospheric events, the long-term events such as desertification and movement of the earth. So there are basically the three main points that you need to address. Why was the town of Pripyat near Chernobyl in the Ukraine abandoned? Now, it's a pretty straightforward answer. You can go through and find out a little bit more information on it by Googling it. But the answer is pretty much here, that it was abandoned after the nuclear accident. The Miss World competition was held in Ordos, which is mentioned here. Suggest why China would be keen to have the event held in that place. So have a bit of a think about, they've got this big city that's been built, no one lives there. Why would they want to hold something like a Miss World event or any big event in that city if no one lives there? What would be the purpose of putting an event like that in a deserted city? The next question, why was water essential to the survival and decline of the city of Angkor Wat? So that will become clear after you watch this video. So have a look through it. Now, the other thing that you can do is also Google Angkor Wat using terms like Angkor Wat water, survival, decline of Angkor Wat, all those sorts of terms. In case you weren't able to pick it up or it wasn't made clear in the video and you don't quite understand what's going on, go onto Google, do a bit of a search, and it should make things clearer. Actually, let's just do a quick search now. Whoops. Okay, so if we write decline of Angkor Wat, I'm just going to put the word water in the search as well. Okay. Whoops, I clicked on that. Okay, there's some suggestions there. Recent evidence suggests prolonged droughts. Whoops. Another little video there that I'm not aware of. Let me just go back to that search. Okay, so you're probably going to be able to find sources quite easily that help explain it if you found that video a bit heavy. Oops, I've got to go back to my website. There it is. So if you weren't able to pick up stuff in the video, because it, like I said, it is quite a complex video, do a quick Google search for Angkor Wat water, decline, survival, any of those key terms, and you should be able to answer that question. What impact might a rise in sea level have on a city such as Venice? Now, last week you talked about the impact of a sea level rise in New York. Venice is slightly different. There has been no information on my website about Venice, so this is something that you're going to have to go and look up. So once again, if we just do a quick search for Venice rise in sea level. Okay, so we've actually got quite a lot of information just from that quick search. We've got a global warming sea level rise map here, so let's have a quick look at that. So what you'll find in the booklet is that the information that you're writing about each week builds on the stuff that you've done in the past, which is why it was important that you sort of kept up to date with it. Okay, so what we've got here, you can see this blue line here. So this is the prediction if the sea level rises 7 meters. So we can actually adjust that. So even if the sea level rises a meter, we can see that, oops, let me just zoom in a bit, Venice is gone. Now, I was actually looking for this in last week's video, but I couldn't find it because they do actually have a similar map for New York. So once again, we can change the sea level rise. So even if the sea level rose a metre, you can see that there are areas here of New York that will be flooded. And if we go to the 5, then there's a lot more. So that's at geology.com. So a quick Google search will give you that information about the rise in sea level. It will be very similar basically to the answer that you wrote for New York, but in case you're not aware, Venice is a city that is built on water. So let's have a quick look at some images. So there we have images of Venice, and you can quite clearly see that there's lots of water around. So it wouldn't take much. Oops. You can see that there really isn't much to go before the water is in the buildings. So the impact on Venice is going to be a lot stronger than even something like New York, which is quite low-lying and interspersed with rivers. the impact is going to be a lot stronger and felt a lot faster somewhere like Venice. Now, the last question is really going to involve a little bit more thought on your behalf. Discuss using research the effect of the closing down of the steelworks in Whyalla or the Holden plant in Elizabeth, which will have on the sustainability of those cities. Suggest likely impacts and possible solutions. So you need to go a little bit deeper, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to. So rather than just saying, well, if Holden closes down, people are going to lose their jobs. So, okay, so those people are unemployed. How does that then impact the town itself? So, well, let's actually look at Whyalla because that's probably a more isolated sample. So in Whyalla, if we have all the steel workers and miners lose their jobs in that factory. So we've then got a large percentage of people who are now unemployed. Can those people still sustain the shops and the resources that are in the town? If they're suddenly gone, do they still need the transport infrastructure? Do they still need the housing developments? And then you've got wider things like if you're unemployed for a period of time, things like mental health and physical health can suffer. Is Whyalla designed to cope with those suffering from both mental and physical illness as a result of losing a job? A lot of the workers in the Whyalla plant are likely to be, I don't want to say unqualified, but qualified to do a particular job. Does Whyalla have the resources to retrain those people? And if they are going to retrain them, are there going to be the jobs available in Whyalla for those people? And if those people have to move out of Whyalla, then they then take their family and maybe extended family with them. So that it's not just a matter of so many people lose their job. There are wider impacts on it. So you need to have a bit of a think about that. Now, I've got their Whyalla or Holden plant in Elizabeth. If you know of or are familiar with other cities or places where large industries have closed down, I can't think of any at the moment, but I know there have been some mines that have closed down in Australia. So you can discuss another place as well if you're not, if you'd rather do that than Whyalla or Elizabeth. So as you can see by all the blank pages afterwards, it is an extended response. The previous questions are things that could probably be done. Videos will be done in one short lesson. Questions can probably be done in another short lesson. So really you've got a 75-minute lesson plus homework to answer that last one. Now let's have a bit of a search for Whyalla. I haven't done this yet, so I'm just seeing whether there's actually anything on the web already. Study finds grim South Australian impact if Whyalla Steelworks closes down. Any closure of Whyalla Steelworks would lead to more than 5,000 job losses across South Australia. And once again, they're not just talking about the people who are working at the mines, they're talking about all the connected infrastructure. Cost the state's economy as much as $770 million. So look, there's quite a few. I've just done a quick web search for, well, I spelled Whyalla wrong. Whyalla Steelworks closed down impacts, and lots of stuff there. So it's not going to be difficult to find the information. It's about processing that information and working out what you think is going to be the impact. And don't forget the second half, which is possible solutions. So if the Whyalla Steelworks closed down, what else can they do? How can they support the workers? How can they create more jobs for the economy? What else can they do? So that's about it for this week. It is going to be a shorter week because we've got a few things on, but there's more than enough time, plus any homework time that you've given. This will be the last week of set bookwork. Next week you'll have opportunity to catch up on any missing pieces, redo any work that you think you're not happy with, and then we'll close off the booklets at the end of next Friday. Thank you.